Another disappointment. Juan Manuel Marquez just being a poor sport with his loss to Timothy Bradley. I thought there were competitive rounds, but he didn't do enough to win. And I thought Bradley outslicked him, outboxed him, was thinking faster and processing faster than Marquez. And I don't like the way him or Nacho really took that loss. They didn't take it like the champion that he is, the warrior he is. They took it really like nasty, like as if Floyd Mayweather is the only guy that's convincingly beat Marquez. They said something like, "Oh, this is six robberies." I mean, you can't go as far as saying every fight, every loss that you lost was a robbery. Like, it gets to a point where you got to be a good sport and just be like, "Hey, he was the better fighter that night." And I just expected more from Marquez. Like I said, he's a seasoned veteran. The Pacquiao fights were close. The first one, he received a draw really on a technicality because one of the judges misscored it and didn't give Pacquiao credit for a knockdown. So you can't call that a robbery. It was a close fight. It was a competitive fight, but not necessarily a robbery. Because if the judge scored it correctly, then technically Pacquiao would have been up by 1 point. It was a close fight. It was a good fight. The other Pacquiao fight, especially fight number 3, I thought Marquez should have won. I would have called that a robbery, but every fight, Norwood, Christian, Bradley, I don't think those are all robberies. Just my personal opinion. And I just expected more from Juan Manuel Marquez. I thought he would take it better, and he really didn't. He didn't even want to fight Bradley, and then Bradley looked vulnerable against Ruslan Provodnikov, and all of a sudden Nacho and Marquez were like, "Hey, we want to be the first Mexican with 5 titles in 5 different weight divisions," and then you lose, and then you don't take it like a man. Like, shit, take your lumps like a man, and then move on, decide if you want to retire or whatever. Another disappointment. Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. Now, growing up, his father was a legend. His father still is a legend. He's done remarkable things in the sport of boxing. And when you have a fucking namesake like Chavez, Julio Cesar Chavez, there's fucking holidays and streets named after your pops. So I expect more from his spawn, from his seed. And I just don't think Chavez Jr. has the same determination, the same ambition to be the best, to be the greatest fighter like his father. His father fought over 100 fights and has a great record, put on legendary performances. And Chavez Jr. just doesn't seem like he's cut from that cloth. There's some things that he inherited, like he has his father's chin. Looks like he can take a well placed shot. He has a chin, but really disappointed. I really disappointed for the fact that I think Chavez Jr. could be a lot better and give us a lot better performances, but he half-asses with his training. A lot of times, cutting weight is the biggest issue and the biggest focus on his training camps. And if he just regulated his diet, because he's a big dude, regulated his nutrition so he didn't have to kill himself to make weight, I think you can get a more focused Chavez Jr. But for whatever reason, he seems like spoiled, seems like a brat. He wants to have these makeshift workouts. He wants to have his trainer, Freddie Roach, waiting at the gym for 2 hours and then not show up and cancel. He wants to train in his living room. He wants to smoke weed when he's facing his biggest fight to date at that time, which was Sergio Martinez. And then this year, the reason why I was disappointed is the weight discrepancy in the Brian Vera fight. Brian Vera and his team were true champions, true warriors. They went with Chavez Jr., who was the bigger name, and they really went with all his demands. The fight was supposed to be held at weight A. Chavez couldn't make it, so he said, "Okay, we're going to fight at weight B." Couldn't make weight B. "Okay, we're going to fight at weight C." And they're letting him dictate all the terms, fight at whatever weight's beneficial to him and comforting to him. And then on top of that, he just pays the fine or whatever, and he doesn't even look great in the fight. He looked pretty sloppy. He was getting tagged. He was trying to play a counter puncher like he was Marquez. And I've seen Chavez Jr., I think one of his better performances was against Andy Lee after a long layoff from the Sergio fight to Brian Vera. I expected a whole hell of a lot more from Chavez Jr. He was a naturally bigger guy. He was dictating all the terms, the weight. He was the bigger star. Probably had a bigger crowd initially before he looked suspect. And he just didn't really perform. He made it a close fight. He was inactive in rounds, looked kind of fatigued or tired, letting Brian Vera, the smaller guy, back him up, and it wasn't an impressive performance at all. So I was really just disgusted and disappointed with the scorecards after, and I don't think it was a good look for Chavez Jr. It did nothing, especially after a long layoff. That's another thing. They postponed his return. The fight was supposed to take place at date A, and he wasn't ready because he gained over 200 pounds, so they pushed it back. So Brian Vera, out of both parties, he was the one that got screwed because he's giving in to all these demands. He's being patient, letting Chavez dictate the weight, change weight, change the date, all kinds of stuff. And then Chavez Jr., at least if you're gonna do all that, come in ferocious and like get a knockout or something, because you really dictated all the terms. So overall, I just wasn't impressed with Chavez Jr. and his lack of preparation, and it showed in this fight. Really shitty performance. In the same vein, Nonito Donaire, another fighter, you got outclassed, you got outboxed by Rigondeaux, which is okay because Rigondeaux is a supreme technician. He's a sharpshooter. But coming back against a guy, Vic Darchinyan, in a rematch, and you sparked him the first fight, you convincingly beat him. Then you fight this fight because you gained a lot of weight, Nonito Donaire, and you fight him at a different weight, move up in weight, and that weight suits you bigger, or excuse me, suits you better because you're a bigger frame dude than Vic Darchinyan, and Vic Darchinyan hasn't even looked exceptional in his last few fights, his last 7 fights. Moreno outboxed him, Abner Mars outboxed him, and he didn't look good in the Gallo fight right before this, and he lets Darchinyan outbox him. You're the fighter with the Filipino flash speed, the power. You're the bigger frame fighter. You're the bigger crowd pleaser. Like the crowd was pro Nonito, and he let Darchinyan counterpunch him, land the left at will. He was landing the left like he was a fucking southpaw, just constantly landing on Nonito. Nonito was taking punishment. He was taking more shots than I've seen him take, probably in 2 or 3 fights, and he was taking that all at the hands of Vic Darchinyan, a fighter you already beat. So honestly, I really expected a lot more from Nonito Donaire, a lot more solid performance. He has potential broken or fractured orbital bone from the shots he was taking, and I expected a sharper, more focused Nonito. Nonito was saying he doesn't know if he's back and he's uncertain. Like, you got to know if you want to fight or if you don't want to fight. Don't just be a fighter who's fighting for a paycheck. You have to really dig down deep. At this level, at the elite level, you have to really want this. Because if you don't, then someone else does. And they're going to take it from you or embarrass you. And luckily, Nonito's saving grace, his left hook came in, and he was able to finally, 1 round before the end of the fight, stop Vic Darchinyan. But overall, not a great performance from Nonito Donaire. And after an upsetting loss to Rigondeaux, who ended your 30 win streak or whatever it was, I expected a whole hell of a lot more from a guy you already beat and a guy who was really placed in front of you to make you look good. It's not like he went from one supreme boxer, southpaw, Rigondeaux, to another complicated fighter like Chris John, who's going to be awkward and hard to fight. You went from a difficult style to a style that should have been a lot easier for you, for your style. Rigondeaux is stylistically a hard fight because he's great on his feet, light on his feet, he's quick as hell, and he's a great counterpuncher, he's accurate, he's a southpaw, and he has power. So going from that to Vic Darchinyan, I really think Nonito should have looked better. Another disappointment. Vladimir Klitschko versus Povetkin. I really expected fireworks from this fight. I don't know why. Everyone knows the heavyweight division is a shell of its former self. But for whatever reason, I was holding out hope. Both guys had some things to say before the fight. They're both big. Povetkin was undefeated. Vladimir Klitschko was on a win streak. And I just expected, anytime you hear the Klitschko name, you think of dominance, dominating the heavyweight division, both of them. And I really expected more. There was a lot of clinching, a lot of grabbing, a lot of fuckery. And I just wasn't impressed with this matchup. I seen plenty of other heavyweight fights this year that were far more entertaining, and this was supposed to be an upper echelon heavyweight fight with 2 guys with good amount of experience that were supposed to go at it, and Povetkin was supposed to really test Klitschko, and he let Klitschko really bully him. I know he's a bigger dude, but he let him hold, fight with dirtier tactics, lay on him, put his body weight on him, and he really didn't. He fought like a bitch. Like he didn't really fight to keep Klitschko off him or to keep him or give him anything to think about. So he refrained from doing the things he was doing. So therefore, he did what he had to do, and he just didn't look good in the fight. Neither of them did. Finally, the disappointment of bad scoring and bad judging. This year has been brutal. I've always seen possible corrupt judges and bad scoring, but I don't remember a year where it was back to back. Like the Brandon Rios versus Richard Abril, I thought that Abril should have beat Rios, even though he was the favorite in that particular fight. But that particular year, I don't know if it was so flagrant and so many in the same sitting. Like this is like 1 week you'll see fight A, and then you'll see fight B 2 weeks later, and it's the same type of horrific judging. So the fact that it's happening so frequently, the frequency in which it's happening has just been very hard to swallow, a hard pill to swallow. We've seen in the Canelo Mayweather fight, Mayweather was dominant. In the 11th round, I think he was just like destroying Canelo, destroying his confidence, toying with him. I think Mayweather was just too fast for him. He's too experienced. There's a spot in the 11th round where Canelo was visibly frustrated. He's punching and he punched wildly and punched the ropes because Mayweather dodged the punch. And Mayweather looks as if he hit a home run. He's like looking through the ropes like, hey, what were you swinging at? It was a boxing clinic. That's all you could say. There's no way Canelo won, and a judge had it a fucking split decision. Same thing with Chavez Jr. versus Brian Vera. Yes, Chavez Jr. is much bigger than Brian Vera, so his fights had more impact on Brian Vera, being the smaller person, but he didn't have the work rate. Brian Vera was tagging him at will. It looked like just because Chavez Jr. has a chin, are we not to give Brian Vera the round when he's clearly outworking, out hustling, and out grinding his opponent? I mean, I don't see how some of these people are judging fights because it's clear to me that they're either biased. It's like their scorecards already filled out. And if that's the case, then I don't even have to see certain fights to tell you who the winner is if you're judging based on who hits the hardest or who's going to be able to deal with the power more. I mean, Manny Pacquiao versus Timothy Bradley, I could have told you before that fight even happened. Manny Pacquiao has a chin, so Bradley probably can't hurt him, and Manny Pacquiao is going to land harder shots, and that's what he did. But you also have to base it off of the round's entirety. If you send 80 shots at your opponent and your opponent sends 3, but they're a more devastating 3, you gotta put it in perspective because Brian Vera, he may not have been able to move the much bigger man, but he was clearly rocking his head back, and he was, I don't know, it was shitty scoring. That's all I'm gonna say. And then we also seen most recently in the Andrade fight with Vanes Martirosyan, they were acting like it was a close fight, barring the first 2 rounds. I thought it was all Andrade. I thought he was just looking better. He didn't look as frustrated. His face looked cleaner at the end of the fight. He was outworking Vanes. Vanes is the fighter with probably more power, more experience, but he just didn't look like it in the fight. And he had to constantly reset, couldn't really reach his opponent, and he kept getting pushed further and further from the fight. So I don't see how the judges had it like Vanes won, 115 to 113, I think was the scorecard. Just some bullshit. So that's the top 10 egos disappointments of 2013. If I miss anything, please leave it in a comment. If you like the list, please comment, dislike it. Really don't give a fuck. As always,